Are the Cleveland Browns ready to be major contenders in the AFC in 2023? We are going to sit down with Locked On Scouting host, Locked On Miami Dolphins host, Mr. Kyle Krabs. All this and more on your latest Locked On Browns.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd, joined here today from Locked On NFL Scouting, also our Locked On Dolphins host. You may have met him, long successful run with the Draft Network, Mr. Kyle Krabs, at Grinding the Tape. Today's episode of Locked On Browns is brought to you by Bird Dogs. The clothing, the apparel, comfortable, smooth, relaxing, and they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL. Everybody who comes in every day, the everydayers, you guys, as always, the fabric on which Locked On is built, certainly which Locked On Browns is built. My suggestion to all the new traffic is become more like the everydayers and make Locked On Browns your first listen. Best way to do that is subscribe to the YouTube channel. Notifications on, so when the content drops, you're there to consume it. And audio-wise, Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said, Kyle Krabs in the house. Third segment, we're going to get to what the legitimacy is for the Cleveland Browns here in the 2023 season as far as postseason potential. Segment 2, a lot of work has been done on the defensive side of the ball here. It was certainly needed it. The question is, how fast can it all come together? Will it all come together? But we're going to kick it off here. Offensive side of the ball here. And this is probably one of the biggest, questions, not just with the Cleveland Browns, not just with the AFC, is with the NFL in general. You miss almost 2 full seasons of NFL action. When you do come back, you go to a new city, new team, new offense, new weapons, all of this while you have some things looming over your head. But for now, Deshaun Watson seems clear, ready to go. Kyle, they gave him some weapons, added something to it. But Deshaun Watson, this is the biggest mystery in the NFL. Like, I know Lamar Jackson, and there's been some issues the last couple of years, but I think everybody felt what needed to be done there for Lamar Jackson to go back to be Lamar Jackson. Deshaun Watson right now, it's a question of, can he throw back on a cape again? Will it have a Superman-esque? Is he the Deshaun Watson that maybe, everybody thought had this potential to be a Hall of Fame talent? But now we're waiting to see, what type of player Deshaun Watson is and will be in 2023.
Yeah, it's the big mystery question, obviously, and it's going to determine how far this Cleveland roster can go when you look at what else was done and what they have on the offensive side of the ball. There's a lot of support here, and you'd obviously be concerned if we get to the end of the 2023 season and we're in early 2024, and we're talking about Deshaun Watson continuing to not look anything like the player that he was during his final few seasons with the Houston Texans. Now, I have to imagine the version of Watson that you saw at the end of last year was the worst version the Browns will see. Obviously, coming back into the fray as late as he did after 11 games and trying to – the rest of the league had been playing for 3 months. And you are now just stepping back in, and things looked like they were happening fast. There was a lack of chemistry, a lack of timing. That's all expected. And I think it's very easy in a lot of – the eyes of fans where if you play Madden, well, you just plug him back in and it's fine. And you upgrade a quarterback and he's a 95 overall. So you're going to have this dynamic quarterback. Like the human element of the game of football doesn't work like that. Right. So I think that was a really good embodiment of that. And I think that is what the first month or so of this season is going to be the biggest thing that I'm watching, probably through week 6. With the San Francisco game. That first block, I want to see how we're playing by the end of that stretch. And I'm expecting to see a player that looked more like the Houston version of Deshaun Watson behind center at quarterback. And if that does not materialize by then, that's when I would start to hit the button and start to worry.
Oh, there's no question. And look, it's a difficult start to the season. And the San Francisco 49ers, that is kind of like your man card test, because they will, if you're anywhere close to being weak, there's any softness to you, that San Francisco 49ers defense will absolutely expose you, and it'll be a bad look. Now, smartly on Andrew Berry's part, look, when you make a $232 million guaranteed investment, you don't just say, all right, well, it's going to work because that's the amount of money we put into it. They were able to get a great move, in my opinion, with the Elijah Moore trade. Here's a player. The Browns are already falling in love. It's literally like their favorite toy under the Christmas tree. They're exploring every day more and more ways, more and more aspects in how they can use Elijah Moore, whether it's out of the backfield, jet motion. I think there are just so many easy layups to get a player like that involved. But, you add in the draft, and it was a little bit of a surprise pick, I think, because it certainly didn't appear like the Browns' top need was a wide receiver. But you go out, get another guy into the room in Cedric Tillman. You add a player like Marquise Goodwin, who could be a factor. It could work out for the Browns that the young wide receivers play so well that maybe Marquise Goodwin doesn't even make it to week 1 with this team. But certainly another added element that can bring something to here. So, when you put so much into it, you basically have to invest on your investment. And I think that's what Andrew Berry and company tried to do here to make sure that when Deshaun is out there, whatever 5 guys they have on the field, any one of them can be a part and can produce. Yeah.
And I think Elijah Moore obviously is such a different skill set than what Cleveland had outside of, Amari Cooper is this route technician and supreme football IQ, one of the smartest route runners in football. And then you have Peoples-Jones, who's a little bit more of an athletic freak, but a thicker guy, not the quick twitch slot type of player. Cedric Tillman being brought in as another big body perimeter type player. David Bell is a player that I liked coming out of Purdue, obviously a high volume player, but not a dynamic athlete. Elijah Moore, from that perspective, I think really moves the needle. And when you think about Deshaun Watson in Houston and the chemistry that he was able to build, not only with DeAndre Hopkins on all those option routes, but then when Hopkins left, Watson statistically had his best season throwing to Will Fuller for the first 3 months of the season before Will Fuller was suspended for a substance abuse or a PED violation. And I think that element of speed, obviously you see it all across the league. It really stresses you in unique ways, and being a crafty route runner is one thing, being a size guy is another, but the element of speed instills a certain level of fear. And the fact that Elijah Moore has that explosiveness and it gets to kind of be the preferred toy to move around, I think bodes well for Elijah Moore. And the more that he can do, I think the more you unlock on this entire offense with when you pair that with what you have up front in the offensive line and Nick Chubb in the backfield.
Once you can get to the point where you're going to have teams worried about Deshaun Watson in the passing game, and then it's, now they give the ball to Chubb. And,
right.
It's like, what are you going to choose there is the lesser of two evils. And it could get to the point where maybe the lesser of two evils is Nick Chubb, which is almost, kind of a Russian roulette type of a scenario where you're back on your heels. And now here is this guy that just comes forward with, obviously low center of gravity. Tacklers just bounce off him. So you're tired from running all over, chasing receivers everywhere. And now all of a sudden, here comes Wyatt Teller pulling through a hole with Nick Chubb behind him. And, all of a sudden, it just adds for what the Browns could do here as a team that looks like they're going to start to transition their offense. And everybody always just talked about the run game to where, it's probably going to be, more pass oriented, because you're not going to have to worry about what you're going to do when Nick Chubb goes off the field. They tried to accommodate Nick Chubb. They kind of tried to accommodate Dearness Johnson. Now it's, well, if Nick needs a breather, that's fine. We can go 0 personnel. We can go 11 personnel because we've got the athletes to win in that capacity too. So certainly for me, something I am looking forward to here. We're going to switch it up here. We're going to get to the defensive side of the ball here. A lot of changes. Right from the boss to everything else. Cleveland Browns, Andrew Berry, another solid offseason. But as we've talked about in the past, offseasons are fantastic. It's all about the regular season and hopefully the postseason. So we're going to continue on here. Your latest Locked On Browns, Jeff Lloyd, joined by Locked On Scouting, Locked On Dolphins host, Kyle Krabs. Bird dogs make you look good. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as a Lululemon, but they fit way better. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. The thing I absolutely love about the Bird Dogs is once they come out of the laundry, I have no idea where they are. I have teenagers. So if they are stealing your clothes, that tells you the story about what kind of clothes they are. And I can never find my Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedon for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnfl for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. Jeff Lloyd, joined by Kyle Krebs here on your latest Locked On Browns. Again, be more like the Everydayers, and the best way to do that and do what the Everydayers do is subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Notifications on, audio-wise, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. 2021, Kyle, for the Cleveland Browns, there was a lot of negativity, but one of the positives you took away from the 2021 Browns is the way the defense developed as the season went on. I think everybody just felt this defense in 2022 was going to hit the ground running. Jadeveon Clowney went back to being the sour Jadeveon Clowney. John Johnson III, in his second year with the team, asking pretty much to play a role that he was never really comfortable with. You didn't get the best of it. We've heard there was a ton of verbiage, a lot of communication that just never really led to any success. And the 2022 Cleveland Browns defense became the storyline. I think everybody thought Jacoby Brissett probably played as well as, if not better than what the expectations were. But a lot of people felt that the defense just straight up let them down. New defensive coordinator, 3 big name defensive linemen brought in. You find that true free safety that his defense has been looking for a few years here. A lot of work was done on the defensive side of the ball. You bring in a legit boss, you bring in legit players, and all of a sudden this defense looks like it should be a solid unit in 2023. But again, there ain't no time to marinate with that early schedule the Browns have.
Yeah, they will be tested early. I can't help but love the additions in starting caliber players and impact caliber players in Za'Darius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson and Juan Thornhill. And you pair that with the nucleus of what was really successful draft picks going back to kind of when this current iteration of the Browns roster started getting built, and you had Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett. There's a lot to like here. I think Martin Emerson showed quite a bit in his first season as well. Obviously, the physicality there speaks for itself. I think you have really good depth in the safety room, and I think that's important with what the linebacker room looks like. Bringing back Sione Takitaki, trying to get Anthony Walker on the field for a full season. Owusu Koromoa is a really good player, but I think he's a little bit more of a skill-specific type of player. So I don't love if you were in base personnel. The good news is 2/3 of the games played in 11 personnel sub package, so you're in nickel groups. I would love to see Juan Thornhill, Grant Delpit, and Rodney McLeod on the field at the same time, and get a safety that can kind of roll down, whether it's Delpit or McLeod or Thornhill. I think there's a fair amount of interchangeability there, and what that allows you to do from a shell rotation and lying to the offense in the pre-snap as far as what you think you're getting versus what you actually get. Having interchangeability at safety there is huge in that third safety. And then Greg Newsome, obviously, is your nickel corner as well. So if they want to go heavy, they can go heavy. If they want to go coverage, they can go coverage. But I think that secondary element paired with putting Za'Darius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson, and not to sleep on Ogbo Okoronkwo too, as the guys up front that are new faces that I think are significant upgrades over what you have. I just don't necessarily think that the Browns are a team that is well suited to absorb an injury up front on the defense. If you have one of the 2 pass rushers go back down, or Dalvin Tomlinson gets hurt for an extended period of time, I don't love the depth that you have. But that's kind of why you play the games, right? It's health's not guaranteed, but you put yourself in the best position that you have. And Cleveland has brought in so many new pieces that I really like the makeup and the DNA of the defense on its entirety. You just have a few essentials that I don't think you could afford to see missing a month at a time or anything like that.
There's no question about that. And there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of belief here that the Browns probably still in the defensive tackle market. Probably just, part of it is, hey, why commit to anything? If you can take the next month for yourself, and then start to figure out, where exactly your plans are going to be for 2023. But exactly, if Dalvin Tomlinson were to miss any time, you're basically back into the same situation this team was in last year. Maurice Hurst, Tristan Hill, these might be nice stories, but these guys have their own question marks as to basically why at this point in their career they are not locked in long-term deals with teams. Jordan Elliott going into year 4, the Browns have made a commitment essentially here for the 4th year. Why? I think just because they know him, and at worst, they know what he can at least give them. And not saying that that's a lot. And I'm sure they would love for some of these people to surpass him, Ika as well. But they have to at least know what they have some sort of constant, even if it's a minimal constant on the defensive line. The edge is where it kind of got interesting because this fan base basically was geeked over Okoronkwo. Look, I thought it was a nice move. And when you saw the money, it was like, well, all right, slow our roll here, guys. You know what I'm saying? We just had a guy that we paid $8.5 million, then we paid $14 million. You look at the money given to Okoronkwo, and you thought, okay, well, money-wise, it tells me here's a guy who's maybe best suited to be a rotational defensive end. And then the Za'Darius Smith move. And I think this is the one that really, really put the onus on it, because here's a guy that's, it's always been about hard work. It's always been about lunch pail with Za'Darius Smith. He's not the greatest athlete in the world, great pass rusher. And for me, one of the things I think that is interesting with bringing in Za'Darius Smith, Myles Garrett's been here all this time. But when you were just this absolutely uber talented athlete, basically cut from like stone, he can talk to anybody on that team and say, oh, well, I did it. And everybody's like, well, I don't have a 40-inch vertical, Myles. I don't run in the 4.5.
I can't do that.
So when Za'Darius Smith talks, I think it's a little bit more relatable because guys can say, okay, well, you're not just going to jump over the left tackle. You know what I'm saying? And it's so much more about technique and, the work that has to go into being a successful player. So I think a guy like Za'Darius, and it's not that Myles is the leader he can be, but I think sometimes more when you talk to somebody that you can maybe see a little bit more of yourself in, it certainly helps.
Yeah, for sure. And, Za'Darius was a really fun story when he came out of Kentucky and goes to Baltimore as a mid-round pick and develops the way that he did. And he goes to Green Bay and Minnesota. Like he's been one of the most versatile outside and reduce inside pass rushers like the last 5 years of NFL play. And to have that too, I think where you can see pass rush packages with Myles Garrett, Za'Darius Smith, and Okoronkwo on the field at the same time, because Za'Darius Smith can reduce down inside and he can rush through the B gap and really win inside and outside. And I think you hit the nail on the head for who he is as a player. And that when you look at a rookie in Isaiah McGuire and a second-year player in Alex Wright, who they drafted on the second day of the 2022 draft based off of tools, because you could visibly see based off the tape at UAB, he wasn't ready to play at the NFL level. And having Za'Darius Smith to kind of talk through, okay, here's how I optimize myself, I think is a great subplot to a pass rush room that you've got a great 3 now, and 2 of them are new faces, and you have a lot of youth otherwise. And what you're able to impress on those guys is going to determine, you're not going to be living in a world where you're paying a bunch of big money contracts across the next 5 years and paying what you're paying Deshaun Watson and be able to keep everybody. Mm-hmm. So, Myles Garrett will be here. We know that's a no-brainer. But what else are you able to retain and having depth where you don't need to go to the well in free agency and pay $10, $12 million for a second tier good but not great pass rusher, because that's the going rate in free agency, because you have guys in-house that are coming off rookie deals and were bred up in the system, and you get, you don't let them test the open market would be critical in my mind for the Browns navigating and building the best possible roster that they can.
It's a fun group, and I'm gonna really enjoy the pass rusher aspect of it, because definitely NASCAR and whatever you want to call it, they can go that route. Jim Schwartz has said he'd like to play 5D lineman. He'd like to rush 5. So you could put a Dalvin Tomlinson package out there with Alex Wright, with Okoronkwo, with Za'Darius, with Myles Garrett. Basically, you get creating one-on-ones everywhere. And if if it's 5-on-5 one-on-ones everywhere, the odds are not great that all 5 of the offensive linemen are going to register a W. And then there's the fact of, well, how do we only put one guy on Myles Garrett? At times, how do we only put one guy on Za'Darius Smith? All right, well, Dalvin Thomas is eating our lunch up the middle. And then there's a guy like Alex Wright, where the one thing he did do last year in all of his rawness was understanding, if I'm not winning. So guess what? I am going to go here, stand like a tree, and I'm going to, clog passing lanes. I'm going to do everything I can to make it difficult. So we did see some growth. And Alex Wright, it got better as the year went on. I think we're going to see a different version of Alex Wright here, where all the newness is out of it, all the nerves are out of it. And part of, again, the jump from UAB to the NFL is a big one. You know what I'm saying? And then you got to realize that week in, week out, everybody is a solid player. Everybody was an All-American. And I think for Alex Wright, that is going to start to, slowly ease out for him, because I think the role for him will be a lot easier for him to find success here. We're going to get to segment 3 here. I'm going to ask Kyle about what he thinks the legitimacy is for the Browns here as far as the AFC this year. And can't have the Locked On Dolphins host in here and not get some thoughts on the Miami Dolphins. Jeff Lloyd, Kyle Krabs, your latest Locked On Browns. As always, appreciate all the everydayers. Again, you guys are the fabric of the Locked On Podcast Network. You are the fabric of Locked On Browns. A lot of major media outlets right now slowly doing away from everyday coverage. Well, what's the good news is for you guys? This is what Locked On is built on. Your team every day. It's not a joke. It's not a punchline. It's what we do. So if other outlets want to move away from that, that's fine, because it should just up what we do here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Jeff Lloyd, joined by @Grinding the Tape, Kyle Krabs, part of the Locked On Scouting podcast. He and Joe Marino do a fantastic job there, and it has been a while. Joe, Kyle, and I have been doing shows for a long time. Everybody green back in the day, and it's kind of funny because Joe and Kyle now are at their stage of their lives, where basically I was back in those days. Both guys, married, family, and it's great to just see the development here and the way things evolve here. I'm definitely becoming the old man, and that's quite all right. I'm quite okay with that. But Kyle, this team, and it is rough because all of this is put on one guy and one guy only. We could talk about every other name on this 53-man roster, and we could talk about it all day long. But the truth of the matter is what is Deshaun Watson? Where is Deshaun Watson versus, and look, 2020, that could have easily been the anomaly. And to think that maybe anybody can play at that pace again, it may be too much to maybe even ask for. But the question is, where can he get to? Which means truly, what can this team get to here in 2023?
I think the good news is you don't have to have 4,800 yards and 30-something touchdown passes with 5 interceptions across a full season to be a competitive football team. And I think when you look at the Browns, and they're very well constructed to play complementary football, and Deshaun Watson just needs to be a positive influence in the passing game. And you have the ability, some ability that Jacoby Brissett did not have, as far as the athleticism and getting outside the pocket and moving the pocket. You have a much more dynamic and versatile level of arm talent with Deshaun Watson versus Jacoby Brissett. And look, Jacoby did a nice job last year, and I know Jacoby very well because the previous year in 2021, he was in Miami and started about a month's worth of games for the Dolphins. So I've seen Jacoby. I know him well. I know his game. He is a quintessential bridge quarterback / ideal backup for a team that wants to push the ball down the field and has the protection to allow things to develop down the field. Deshaun Watson, I think, gives just unlocks some basic components of the offense when you are going to run the football at a high level and you want to play action out of that. And then you want to roll out and run naked and get outside the pocket, right? Watson doing those things, I think that is where I would lean in early and let him get into a rhythm. Don't ask him to sit here and make full field reads from the pocket with consistency when we're only going to be starting our 6th game in the last 3 years. I think you get him you lean on what you have early, and you're probably going to be in some dogfights with Cincinnati and at Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football and Baltimore and San Francisco. Like, it's a tough stretch. I think if you get through that stretch with 2 or 3 wins, you've really positioned yourself well to get to double digits at the end of the road. And that's what you're going to have to get in my mind with this year's AFC field to get into the postseason. I think Watson can certainly be a better player than what he was last year. I don't think he would be any worse. I don't think you need him to be 2020 Watson either. I just think you need a quality starter at the quarterback position. And I don't see any reason why by the end of the year, they will not have put enough around him for that to be the case. It just all has to come together from a chemistry perspective.
And there's no question about it. And I've been saying here for a couple of weeks here, the AFC, it's going to be a raw deal because you're definitely going to get a team with a winning record. You might even get a team with double-digit wins that, unfortunately, Kyle, is going to be just like you and me sitting on the couch watching the NFL playoffs unfold. Sometimes it happens. It's just the way it works. But, the AFC right now, it's just an absolute dogfight, and there's competition everywhere. Getting to some of the competition here in the AFC, and maybe different circumstances leading to why there would be questions. But for the Dolphins, there certainly are questions, with Tua and, all he went through last year. The weapons are there. I mean, and I remember at first, when, the Tyreek Hill move went down, it was like, well, okay, it sounds great, but how does it work? You basically have 2 guys that are very, very well. You know what? Shut up, Jeff. Because it worked, and certainly worked well. Because basically it was, well, there's no way I can't even cover one of them. So how in the world are you going to be able to cover both of them? And you saw the dividends there. But Kyle, the prospects here for the Dolphins this year, obviously work to be done. Work has been done. Possibility of maybe a work to still be done. Although Dalvin Cook going back to South Beach still gives me a little bit of nerves, perhaps. But the Miami Dolphins here, Kyle, and what do you believe truly are their expectations in 2023?
Well, this is a team that, for the first time in about 20 years, has stacked together 3 consecutive winning seasons. So there is, amidst the coaching change and all the drama around the quarterback position when Brian Flores was still there, and all of the discussion around the injury component of Tua Tagovailoa this past season, they have managed to find a way to go 10-6, 9-8, 9-8, and they made the postseason last year. They took a skeleton crew up to Buffalo and scored 31 points, forced 3 turnovers, and almost beat the Bills. So I think that's the biggest source of inspiration for Miami is that last year that Brian Flores was there in 2021, the Dolphins against the Bills averaged 5.5 points offensively. Now, they went out and they scored 21, 29, and 31 in 3 games against the Bills last year. And obviously the Bills with 4 consecutive AFC East titles, that's the team that you're chasing. Not to sleep on the Jets as a team that obviously has made some big improvements, but the expectations for Miami should be we are competing for a division title. And they have gone out, brought in Jalen Ramsey. They obviously are getting everybody healthy for the start of the season. They had a number of critical players that played through injury, like Xavier Howard and Teron Armstead last season. It's going to really depend for them on how much their depth is stressed. But what I do like about what Miami has done is they went out and they continue to add more difference maker impact style players like a Jalen Ramsey, where you'd like to think if you have a couple blue chip guys that go down for a stretch of time, you still have enough impact players that you can be flexible with how you play. And those guys will make you plays and win football games, because it was such a stark contrast last year. Like if Tua and Teron Armstead didn't play, you didn't stand a chance. And that is some of that responsibility falls on Tua Tagovailoa. Some of that responsibility falls on Mike McDaniel. But you have to be able to change the way that you play depending on who you have behind center. And I think that was some of the rookie coach mistakes and growing pains for Mike McDaniel that they've kind of alluded to. So I don't think this team, you could sit here and say, oh, well, they'll just stay healthy this year and they'll be fine. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think they've positioned themselves to learn the lessons from last year to get through those rough patches and not go like 1-5, which is what it looked like last year.
And it's going to be an insane year. Certainly, on the AFC side, a lot of talent everywhere. I mean, there's about two teams where you can write off, but even still, the Houston Texans, we might write them off for 2023, but I think the Houston Texans are going to be a force, and they could be a force by late 2023, and certainly going to be a pain in the butt probably come 2024. DeMeco Ryans is going to get it done down there. He is Kyle Krebs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, our Locked On Dolphins host. He and Joe Marino, the Locked On Scouting Podcast. Both of them do a fantastic job over there. Make sure you're following at Grinding the Tape. Myself, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. The show, Locked On Browns. Now, as far as being part of the Everydayers, guys, join the crew here, almost 6,000 strong. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, notifications on. Audio-wise, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcast. It's been a great week here. We'll kick it off again come Monday. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.